Welcome to the 140th Wing Records Management Basic User Training. This training fulfills the annual training requirement for records management as required by the Air National Guard Manual 33-363. The A&G Manual implements AFI 33-322 and defines the roles and responsibilities to manage Air Force records within the Air National Guard and establishes the record management program for all Air National Guard. The 140th Wing Communication Flight, the Knowledge Management Office, fills the base records manager function for the wing and is appointed by the wing commander. Today, this block of instruction will cover records management responsibilities, what is a record, types of records, records life cycle, essential records, and the program updates for the Air National Guard as found in the A&G Manual 33-363. So, why is records management important? Records serve a vital role in documenting the Air National Guard mission. Records provide evidence and accountability of the organization, function, policy, and procedures to the public, Congress, Department of Defense, and Air Force. It ensures important information is available to support effective decision-making, thus enhancing the readiness and lethality along with protecting the legal rights of the Air National Guard and public. Bottom line, records are created and received by military, civilian, and contractor personnel to document official business, provide a record of past events, and serve as a basis for future actions. With that in mind, what are the responsibilities regarding records management? All Air Force personnel, active duty, reservist, guard, federal employees, and contractors are responsible for creating, maintaining, and preserving federal records. Commanders at all levels are responsible for establishment and maintenance of effective records management programs within their organizations to ensure proper collection, preservation, and safeguarding of records. As a federal employee or contractor, you must know and follow the records management policies and procedures. You must follow retention and disposition guidance specified in the records disposition schedule. You must inform appropriate officials of any actual impending or threatened unlawful removal, alteration, or destruction of federal records. You are subject to federal laws and regulations, and you can be held liable if records are not properly maintained or disposed of in accordance with regulations. Violations of this could result in criminal penalties. Ultimately, poor records management can lead to the potential for mission failure. As we just heard, we are all records management users in the Air Force. At some point in our career, we will establish a record. Since we are no longer in the typewriter days where it was easier to have control of the information being produced, it is a requirement for all Air Force personnel to ensure the record is created, is maintained, is secured, and is preserved appropriately. Let's drill down this some more. What are your responsibilities here in the Air National Guard? Are they any different than any other airman or guardian? If anyone answered yes, then I am very disappointed in you. The correct answer is the Air National Guard users' responsibilities under the A&G Manual remain the same as in the AFI 33-322. So, what is a record? As defined by the Federal Records Act, basically records are your electronic and paper files. Records include all recorded information, regardless of form or characteristics, made or received by a federal agency under a federal law, or in connection with the transaction of public business, and preserved or appropriate for preservation by that agency or its legitimate successor as evidence of the organization's functions, policies, decisions, procedures, operations, or other activities of the government, or because of the information value of the data in them. An Air Force member can determine whether the recorded information is an Air Force record if it is identified in the Records Disposition Schedule or the National Archives General Records Schedule. The information was received and or created by an agency employee, this includes contractors, on agency time to facilitate agency business, to include telework. It documents functional information about agency business. The information is maintained and controlled by the agency. The information was distributed and used by employees to conduct agency business. It required action, supports area of work, or provides specific instruction. It documents what happened, what advice was provided, who was involved, order of events, and the decision-making process, or if it contains information restricted from release under the Privacy Act of 1974, preservation order, or an ongoing investigation. In addition, no matter what, all records require protection from common threats, especially paper records from mildew, light, dust, insects, rodents, and excessive humidity, which may cause a loss of legibility or contribute to an accelerated deconstruction. There are two types of records: temporary records, which can be destroyed upon approval from the National Archives and Records Administration, or NARA, after a fixed period or after the occurrence of an event. May be destroyed by an agency when the approval time for destruction is up. The vast majority of Air Force records are temporary. Permanent records are determined by NARA as having enduring value as documentary evidence of the organization and functions of the Air Force. They must be transferred to NARA's ownership to preserve forever once they are no longer needed for business purposes. Whether a record is temporary or permanent determines what eventually happens to it in the record's life cycle. Remember that term, record's life cycle. We're going to talk about it a couple slides later. Within those two types of records I just described, there are three categories of records: essential, necessary, and useful. Essential records can be thought of as those records an organization must have within 12 to 72 hours after a disaster or emergency. Basically, these essential records are needed in order to continue to meet operational responsibilities under national security emergencies or other emergency or disaster conditions, and to protect the legal and financial rights of the federal government and those affected by the government activities. However, organizations must exercise caution in designating records as essential. Only those record series or electronic information systems most vital to emergency operations or the preservation of legal or financial rights should be so designated. Essential records must be reviewed and updated annually. Typically, essential records only make up 3 to 7% of all the records in a unit. The other categories are necessary records, which you should have within 2 to 6 weeks after a disaster or an emergency. Useful records you would like to have within 4 to 6 months after a disaster or an emergency. Back on slide 5, if you remember, a term records life cycle was used. This life cycle can be viewed as phases, and those phases are in the record's lifespan. The life cycle starts when the record is created or received by an agency. continues through the record's use, maintenance, and storage before finally being destroyed or archived permanently. So, the life cycle of a record consists of the following 3 phases: creation and receipt, maintenance and use, and the disposition. For records disposition, do not make personal decisions to destroy Air Force records. Disposing of records without authorization is defined as removing them from Air Force custody, destroying or altering them without regard to the schedules in the record's disposition schedule. If you willfully and unlawfully destroy, damage, or alter records, the maximum penalty is a $2,000 fine, 3 years in prison, or both, loss of office, and a disqualification from holding any U.S. office. Follow the record's disposition schedule found in the Air Force Records Information Management System, also known as AFRIMS, or on your finding aid. There are different dispositions for different records. Paper records with a retention period of more than 3 years but less than 8 years are transferred to the base staging area. However, here at Buckley, this is no longer applicable due to the closure of the base staging area. Your legacy hard copy records will be stored within an office location that allows for easy retrieval of information and will continue to be digitized. Let's take a look at the new requirements found within the A&G Manual 33-363. All wings will have one corresponding inventory of records entered in AFRIMS by the base records manager. This is versus the multiple inventory of records entered in AFRIMS by the different groups under the wing previously. In order for the groups to find a file number, a finding aid has been created. An example of the finding aid created by the base records manager for the groups will be on the next slide. Within the A&G Records Management Plan, the wings are to clean up and consolidate all file shares and ERM drives to one drive as the central location for electronically stored information. As of 1 October 21, the 140th wing will only have one shared drive. I also have a slide with an example of how the folder structure will look like in the shared drive. With the consolidation of the inventory of records within AFRIMS, the 140th wing now has a finding aid. Each document folder in the shared drive is assigned a number from the finding aid. As the shared drive is organized, if an appropriate folder number is not contained within the finding aid, please let my office know and I will add the appropriate folder and number from AFRIMS into the finding aid. Here is an example of how the nested folder structure needs to look like within your office. Every main folder within your office folders will be labeled using the number and the title from the finding aid. Every document must be in a folder. No loose documents. If you have any questions, here are the references for this program. The 140th Records Management SharePoint site is also listed here, which contains further detailed instructions for the shared drive cleanup. This now concludes this block of instruction. Please feel free to reach out to me if you have any further questions. Thank you.